the WHA is very excited to bring to you Irfan Naseem from Haylight Industries, also founder and owner of Sea Pinch and Saltexture. So I kind of refer to Irfan a bit of a salt guru. What he doesn't know about salt isn't worth knowing. And Irfan has just returned from a trip to your factory, if I'm not mistaken, in Pakistan, where
Correct.
you've been there sussing things out. So I thought, who better to hear from than yourself to give us a bit of insight into what's happening over there in Pakistan and tell us everything you know about salt and answer all our burning questions. So
Brilliant. So yeah, it's been my first trip back since COVID. So I've been out not in Pakistan for around 18 months. So going back, it was supposed to be a 2-week trip. It ended up being a 4-week trip. Lots of new things going on, lots of new developments. A lot of things happened last year during COVID, which we had to work through. Trip's really been about nailing down on some new research and development in basically building salt rooms, the way that they're developed, bringing out some new accessories and aesthetics for salt rooms, so new salt lamps, looking at some new design of some new salt lounges, seating areas, and tables. So it's been very eventful.
great. Well, I think you had a little bit of problem getting your screen sharing up and running. So I think I'm going to try and take over. I think I've got the photos that you were going to show. So perhaps if we can just kick off and where you can all see that beautiful landscape.
Yep, that's it.
Okay, we've also got this. So you've been pretty much in the middle of nowhere. Are these the Himalayas that we see here?
So these are what they call the Himalayan foothills, which make up the start of the Himalayas, which known to the outside world, we all see that the Himalayas is just one mass of mountain, but it extends for several thousand kilometers. And this is literally what we call the beginning, the salt range, where the mass amounts of deposits have been deposited of salt. I mean, this range is it's around 1,600 kilometers deep.
Wow.
It'll take you a good few hours to cross this, and some of it is actually uncrossable. It's so high up, anywhere between 12 to 16, 17,000 feet up is the highest peaks on there. The first picture that you saw was the Sasrikar range. So that was the Sasrikar peak, which is one of the highest peaks in Pakistan of that range. Yeah, and that's literally a mound deposit of salt.
Oh, really? So if you were to kind of take the
Take
covering
away,
off
yeah.
of it, you'd find a whole load of salt underneath.
Yeah,
I think
exactly
it's quite
that.
incredible. Here's some of the landscape that Irfan's been driving through. So how long from civilization are we talking to get out here?
So typically a drive from, say, one of the main central cities of Pakistan, Islamabad, you're looking at around 3 hours to get right into the heart of it. The drive up is quite treacherous. It's a single road, no double ways, side edge cliffs, and you go through various inclines of around 10 to 16, 17 degrees pitches on some of these roads. For the normal layman who hasn't driven through here, I wouldn't recommend it. That picture there, Erin, is actually what we call the route of Pakistan, which is similar to Switzerland. So there's very windy roads that go through the salt range. That's coming off the northern upper end of the salt range, coming down to basically landmass.
It looks quite barren, really, doesn't it?
Very barren. The areas above the salt range are very green and fertile, what they call the plateau. But on the other sides of it, one side's barren and the other side's quite evergreen.
Oh, right.
So it's this side that you're looking at is part of the it's probably quite dry and arable, the land. Yeah.
What are those green things there?
So
I thought it was a lake first.
So this is people that are farming. Apologies for the noise. Someone's just doing a bit of drilling. This is actually people that are farming within the range. So they could be growing vegetables or fruits.
Oh, okay. Wow. So you can actually do that there. Does it rain a lot?
No, very little rain falls here. And when it does rain, though, a lot of it is held within the mountain range. So there is a lot of rivers and streams, so forth.
Brilliant. Okay, so you headed 3 or 4 hours up from the main civilization up to the salt mines. Does that get you up to the salt mines?
So this is up to the peak. So I think one or two of the roads, which the one that on there, that is like literally one of the arid roads that leads up to the salt mines.
That's not the main town, is it?
No, literally that is the main town.
Wow.
That is literally the main road in the main town. So the only people that are literally live in these areas are the miners and the workers.
Right.
Otherwise, in terms of general mass population, there isn't very much.
Gosh, it looks very poor there, actually, doesn't it?
It's a very, I would say, these regions, because they're so hard to reach, that we haven't really got what we would call civilization in terms of, your gas, your water, your electric supplies. It's very hard to get it there. You're having to cross several peaks and troughs to get there. So yeah, it's very 1990s.
I did spot something pretty impressive in your photos.
Yeah, this just makes me even wow. They're building this new monument on top of a mountainside, and they started building it a good few years ago. And everything is taken up.
Are you boarding? Is that a flight to Pakistan?
69 X-ray.
I have just been told to move my car.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
You get Hannah to move it for you.
Hannah's going to find it very difficult to move my vehicle. Can we have a short intervene whilst I just move this vehicle?
Okay, sorry, yes, go on then. There's nothing like live TV or live webinars. I'm going to show some short videos while you're off. How's that?
I'll be right back.
Well, while Irfan's gone, if anyone wants to unmute and say hello, feel free to do that. It's lovely for you to join us. And if you have any questions that you want me to get in there and ask him as well, obviously we can do that when he returns. I've got a few videos here.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hello.
Hi, I'm Phyllis Miller. I live on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. I have the Outer Banks Salt Cave. And I enjoyed the conference in December. That was great. And I was looking forward to this as well. And one of the things I'm interested in is we are constantly bombarded with messages from salt miners offering us all kinds of salt products. And we have no way to do quality control on them.
Yeah.
And it has been a nightmare a couple of times, the few times we've entered into it. So one of the things I'm interested in is how can we properly vet vendors that we would like to buy from, but just can't do it.
That's a great question. One of the things I had down was also finding out about the difference in color and how that affects the quality as well, because I know that it does. So we'll definitely get Irfan to talk to us about that. And for sure, quality control. We want to be making sure we're getting our money's value, don't we? So thank you. That's a great question. I've got that on my list. Did anyone else have any other ones they wanted me to ask? Hi, Mariola.
Hi. Hello, my name is Mariola. I'm from Bristol in England. I'm new into the business, but not new about knowing about salty business, because I'm from Poland and it's very popular in our country. And that was a place when I was visit the salty caves and some other places outdoors as well, which is a big thing in Poland, really. Yes. So many times. Then it's not new for me, but new in Bristol and new in England, definitely.
Oh, brilliant.
I'm curious about anything what we're going to be talking today about.
Oh, fantastic. Right, let me show you some videos which we can then might spur on some more questions. The reason I was asking about it being very poor, because I've had a look at these questions, or sorry, some of these videos, and you can see that they're using very basic techniques to do some of this. So here they're actually just taking a cube of the salt, and they're turning it into a spherical object. I'm guessing it might be like a spherical candle or something like that. But, you know, I could sit here and watch it for hours just looking at how they do it. It's so impressive.
Erin?
Yes.
Yes, hi, I'm Elaine. I have a question for you.
Yes, of course.
I am absolutely new to the business. I'm thinking seriously to have a place, and that's why I'm gathering information, learning about salt in general. One of the things that I've learned is that Himalayan ended in chambers for inhalation. So I'd like to have you take out on this, and also our guest.
I'm really sorry. I think you cut out right at the critical moment there. I didn't hear what you said.
Himalayan salt apparently is not recommended for breathing, or so I'd like to have your intake.
Yes. So pink Himalayan salt, the reason that it's pink is because it has over 80 different minerals in it, from iron to calcium, magnesium, and dirt. So from a pure point of view, you should be using as pure as possible salt. So I use 99.9% sodium chloride, so pharmaceutical grade salt, because it doesn't have any of these impurities in it. So that you know what you're inhaling into your lungs. And I think that's quite important. And especially because we're not from a medical profession, it's important that we're not putting various different elements in there without knowing what they do. So I will always use pharmaceutical grade salt. Obviously in the salt mines in Poland, it's a different salt anyway. And it doesn't have these same impurities either, which create the beautiful pink and orange hues. Irfan, you look like you're in a salt mine at the moment. You look like...
I'm back right now.
Brilliant. Right, so I was just showing a video here.
Apologies for that, everybody. I got told I was only allowed to park my vehicle for 30 minutes, and I've been here longer.
Rule breaker. Right. Yeah. So where were we? We were heading up to the salt mines, weren't we?
Yeah. So generally the salt mines are really isolated, very uninhabitable areas. The miners are the ones that really kind of stay around there. Families tend to stay separate, so a lot of the workers tend to go home once a month from there. So yeah.
Wow. And what kind of hours do they work in those salt mines?
So typically they're on shift patterns, depending on if it's a private mine or one owned by the governments. Days usually start around 10 o'clock till around 4 because of daylight hours.
Right.
And also because of safety. So to get, they have lighting down there, but because it's, some of these mines and these levels run down several hundred meters. So they tend to have those 6-8 hour days at most.
Right.
And they're off, and they don't work on a Friday and Saturdays. Okay.
So I think I just kind of touched on as well. It looks quite basic, all the equipment that they have there that they use for mining. So how do they get into the mine? How do they create the mine in the first place? Let's start there.
So it's actually going back to a British era of when the mines actually began. So when India and Pakistan were one country, an engineer called G.E. Wharf, who was a mining engineer, and under the under English rule, when it was colonized by the English, Wharf was the first engineer to actually develop the first mine in Quetta. And Quetta is the mine that everybody talks about, that where all your salt comes from. Quetta mine actually now is actually just a museum. And they don't actually mine from there anymore because the deposits are really scarce in pink salt, and it's very crystalline salt. It's very hard to work with, and it's very fragile earth now. So Quetta is actually the second largest unearthed mine in the world where salt deposits are from. The majority of the salt now comes from the salt range, from the Himalayan foothills, but from other parts of the range. So not from Quetta. So GE Wharf was the one that established a mining presence using what we call traditional room and pillar. So just imagine you're in a room, you just leave the four corners up in pillars, and you would extract the rest of the room, and they would continue to do that throughout the mines. And that is the method that is still being adopted to date. So there's no magic machinery, there's no very large diggers underground. It's literally ball and chain. They crack massive sections out of salt out of the mines, and they use a room and pillar method, which is, you're going back to the early 1800s when this was established.
Wow. And how many mines are there in the Himalayas?
So I would say you've got no more than, where deposits are actually coming from right now, no more than a handful. In terms of what's happened over the last 18 months, well, one of the largest mines in a place called Galabag actually had collapsed, because it's actually on the major, its major wall is actually in line with the Indus River. So they were going so far down that the actual river collapsed into the mines. So that mine actually closed, and that was one of the biggest mines that they had in Pakistan. So now the other, I'd say 8 or 9 mines are nowhere near as big as Galabag.
Crikey. And so how many people do you think are working over there in the mines at any one time?
I'd say no more than anywhere between 30 and 50 people within the mines themselves. And outside of the mines, there's probably in the region of 100 to 200 people, which are mainly drivers, facilitators that are helping move the rock salt about. But within the mines, it's very, very limited to the amount of people that are in there, just because of safety as well.
Yeah. So I'm just playing little videos as we're talking anyway, just showing some of the images you sent through. We were just discussing before you jumped on about using the Himalayan salt, or what we should be using for halotherapy. But what is Himalayan salt kind of best for? Let's say, what are its main uses?
I'd say the biggest use for Himalayan salt has always been, and it's been, it's always been used in anything to do with your health and body use. So Himalayan salt is a very, very good bathing salt, really good for skin conditions. As an edible salt, it's much cleaner than table salt. I mean, we're doing this trade show today, and it's all about food and awareness. And I think as consumers are now really educating themselves on food, it drives me crazy to think how many people are still consuming table salt, knowing it's man-made, knowing there's things like cyanide in there and anti-caking agents. And we all talk about having clean food, and everything that we use has salt in it, and salt brings out the best of flavors in your food, but everyone tends to ignore it as it's the one ingredient that I think people should take more caution to using. I mean, table salt only came around because of the civilization and the rate of industrialization of the world. Before then, everything was consumed as was rock salt, and as it became more expensive, then they had to find an alternative, and the alternative was, let's use seawater, let's hydrate the seawater, let's pull the salt from there. But literally, when they do that, they strip absolutely everything from it.
Right. And obviously you've got lots of minerals in the Himalayan salt, which gives it its color. But what about quality? Had a question there from Helena about, how do you know what kind of quality you're going to get? What quality control is there on the products that come out of the Himalayas?
That's a great question, and something that I've delved with our chemists internally. And I have to say, and it's really sad to say this, but a majority of the salt leaving Pakistan, especially food grade salt, isn't what I would class as the best salt. Most of the people that are involved in the trade really don't understand the chemical and the natural composition of the salt. And we developed something what we called, you have the 4 C's for diamond selection. We have something called the CCI, and it's basically the color, the clarity, and the inclusions. So whenever we select our raw material, especially for food grade salt, we always look at those 3 very particular aspects. The color of the salt cannot be pure white or white, but it can't be too dark red. The dark red, once it reaches what we call a point of inflection, you start getting obviously you get a good abundance of minerals, but then you also start getting stone and grit and sand and other things that you don't actually want in there. So that's one thing. Color is really of importance to us when we select. The other thing is the clarity. Now we talk about clarity, and what we do with that is we look at, by using the natural sun's light, is we actually use the sun's light to see how well the sun's rays reflect through the salt itself. And that actually shows you how much of impurities there are in there, which comes to the inclusions. So if you have a lot of inclusion, this is a great picture there, in which it clearly shows you that the one on the left is on the borderline of white to pink, and the one on the right is what we call the optimum color, clarity, and inclusion. But the one in the middle, the dark red, is something that we tend to avoid for using for food grade salt.
Okay, just because it's got too much dirt or
Yeah, exactly that. Too much dirt, too many impurities. So if you actually did what we do as a dissolve test, and you dissolved all 3 of them in a glass of water, you would see that the middle one would leave you far more impurities than any other one. Right. Now, when it comes to food, that's of paramount importance. When it comes to architectural salt or salt room for walls, that's again completely different. We look for that in terms of the strength and integrity of the salt as well, but also to make sure that you don't get so many inclusions, because sometimes what happens is you get a very large amount of fractures within your salt bricks. So these things are really about education and knowledge. And that's the one thing that we're trying to do, is we're trying to get people and get consumers and get people who are interested in building salt rooms and halotherapy, that you need to have the right type of salt. Because here's a perfect example. If you chose that middle one for your salt rooms and you put your salt rooms in, the natural ability for the salt to sweat and create an environment which is salty and allow the walls to sweat and then recrystallize would not happen. So you need to have the optimum salt for your salt rooms also as well.
Right. And does this affect like the hardness as well? And the, like when you dissolve or get water on salt bricks as well?
Exactly that as well. Yeah. So if you have a very gritty salt, once the grit absorbs the water, it fractures internally much quicker. Right. Whereas a very crystalline salt, like the one on the left and the right, once water hits them, rock salt's surface is naturally quite impermeable to water. So if you ever notice, if you had a piece of salt as a block and you put water on it, it doesn't dissolve right through. It doesn't create a pond. It doesn't sink. It's because naturally it will sit on the surface. And if it's quite a gritty one, it will actually find its way through the crevices.
Right, because I think we've talked about there's a good one. The different colours, or we even talked about maybe it was, I'm sure you said something about it as nearly as hard as diamonds or something.
Yeah, so pure crystalline white salt that literally looks like a diamond has been actually created by Mother Nature under the pressure of the mass on top of it to the same pressure as what diamond gets exhibited on. Funnily enough, the whole salt range is made up of 3 layers of material. The first one is gypsum, and below gypsum is pink salt, and below pink salt is coal. Now you'll always find these in nature in those 3 layers. Now, the ones below coal is what diamonds are made from. So, the immense pressure that is applied to coal is what graphite and where your diamonds come from. And that now happens to some of the salt. It gets immense amount of pressure put on the salt that it becomes so crystalline that it's actually as strong and as hard as a diamond to scratch the surface, and its hardness as well. So the Mohs hardness is what they call it in chemical terms, is how resistant and how strong it is comparable to diamonds.
Wow, that's impressive, isn't it? And also the price of the salt, that is impacted by the color as well, because I remember you holding up a piece of salt to me and saying it was like worth about £1,500, and it was, it was only yay big.
Small, yeah. So pure crystalline, what we call diamond salt. Literally, if I gave it to you in your hand, you unless you really knew or unless you licked it, you would actually think it was a diamond.
Wow.
So that salt is what we industries would use. That's healthcare or for saline or for IV drips. So it's a very, very pure crystalline salt, and that is worth its weight in gold, basically. And as the colors vary from the crystalline white to the light pink to the pink to the dark pink, it gets to that point where then it becomes very gritty and there's no real C value in there.
So these are white ones, aren't they? So they are quite expensive, I'm guessing.
So these are not as expensive as the pure crystalline white, but these are the second one. So these are very hard to work with in terms of trying to create a brick from there, or to create a salt lamp or any other kind of handcrafted item, because the structure of it is so crystalline, you don't know which way it's going to break.
Right, and it's also very hard as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So going back to these images, obviously when they mine out the salt, it obviously comes out in chunks.
Yes.
How do they move it all about?
Tractors and trucks.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then they kind of take these big chunks and do what we saw on some of these images and use some of these saws to...
Yeah, so it's something that I didn't really get to answer, but one thing that's quite of interest is people say, why is the machinery so bad? And there's one very, very good reason for that. There is no point investing in very, very expensive, clean, shiny machinery, because within a week they will look like that.
Wow.
The salt is so corrosive to steel and metal that anything it touches, it will literally start to make it rust within a few days. I've seen it happen with, the best of machines, and people say, oh, we've got a brand new machine, and within a few weeks and a few months, it's literally, it's at the point where it looks like it's from 200 years ago. But what they do is they condition the blades. So once the rust hits those blades, it gets to a point where they don't rust anymore.
Wow. Okay.
So then they can continue to use them. So everyone does say, "Oh my God, they're like they look like they should be in the bin." But actually, they're doing an absolutely brilliant job, because the machines are being conditioned and they've absorbed as much as what we call the interstitial moisture onto the surface, and so then they can continue to use these machines without having to say, well, aesthetically they don't look great, but mechanically they work perfectly well.
As you can see, the piles of dust or salt dust there all building up. Is that what that is? All the white?
Yeah, that is all pure salt everywhere. Just salt.
Gosh.
So that's the best type of halotherapy room you can have.
So we've talked about how big the pieces are and how to move them, but how much of it is there in the Himalayas?
Oh, interesting question. Well, there's been analysis done, and it's been analysed by the Pakistani government, the Development Corporation, the Mineral Development Corporation, and they're saying that the reserves there are in excess of 600 billion tons. And they said, you could go on for X amount of lifetimes, but the deposits that we're touching are less than like 0.05% of what's there.
Gosh. Oh, so that's good to know that we're not going to run out of it anytime soon.
It's a very, very abundant resource, but also as well, the resource is, you've got the elevations of some of these really high peaks, which are all salt, but we actually don't know how much is underground as well.
Mm. Do we know how long it takes to form?
So anywhere, so there's you know, a lot of people talk about millions of years, but really we believe that the salt range and the deposits there now are probably several thousand years old, or several 100,000 years old. And they were literally formed as a landmass, which was originally an ocean. So all this landmass that we see right now was actually under ocean, which has created this. It's immense. You know, we drive through it, and we're always mesmerized by, you know, when they've. The good thing about the extraction as well is it's all underground. It's not open top mining.
And so when they're cutting all these bricks up and packaging them all up, what's the kind of largest size that you can actually get cut as a brick or a block?
So this one here that you're looking at is just a job that we've just done for a Spanish client, and those blocks there are the bottom right hand corner. They are 12 inches by 9 inches by 5 inches deep, and they weigh around 25 kilos each.
Wow.
In terms of size that we can go to, we've currently been experimenting with tiles. We've managed to create a 20 mil tile, which is 24 inches long and 12 inches wide. So it's quite a large piece. In terms of what's the maximum we could probably cut to, I'd say it all dependent on the size of your saws, but you could easily get a 24 by 24 inch piece out of a block.
Wow. And I keep going back to this little elephant. How on earth do they do such detail? It's very, very impressive to, you know.
The artisans in Pakistan are renowned for the heritage in handicrafts. I've seen guys that have done eagles, they've done horses, they've done, you know, this is quite a what I would call an ordinary one. Some of them are, you know, you look at them and they're all literally hand done on blades and just small chisels. It is absolutely amazing what they can do.
If there's not any more questions, I think we'll try and wrap it up there. I think that's been really, really interesting finding out all that information about pink salt. Who knew it could be so interesting? I mean, I know we're all passionate about salt, but there's so many different aspects to it, both in pink Himalayan salt and the salt that we use for our halotherapy. So thank you for sharing that with us, Irfan. I'm very interested and look forward to seeing some of the new products that you're bringing to the market.
Brilliant.
It certainly sounds like you're being very innovative in what you're creating. So,
well, it's been it's been a challenging 18 months, but what we've seen over the last 6 or 7 months, the demand, especially for the clients that we're onboarding now, it made sense for us to obviously open a North American office. And we've, you know, there's a Middle East office now in the pipeline as well, because a lot of people are saying even though there is the availability, the expertise isn't there.
Right. That's fantastic. Well, thank you for that. And no doubt we will be speaking to you again soon about something else regarding salt. But thank you for joining us this evening, and to everyone else, whatever time of day it is, wherever you are.
Thank you very much.